There's a kind of cruelty people excuse far too easily, the kind wrapped in laughter, hidden behind the words "come on, it's just a joke." But the person on the receiving end never laughs. They just try to stay steady, keep their dignity, and pretend the sting doesn't burn. She was only doing her job, quiet, respectful, careful, when a pack of bored teens decided she would be their afternoon entertainment. They cornered her on the dock, grinning as she backed away trembling, and with one heartless shove, they sent her into a lake swarming with piranha, never caring about her terror or her life. They were still laughing when a shadow moved across the shore. They didn't see him at first. They didn't realize their fun had been witnessed. But they were about to learn painfully that someone had seen everything, and he wasn't the type to let cruelty go unpunished. Before we continue, thank you so much for being here and supporting these stories. Your time, your attention, and your kindness truly mean the world. If you enjoy powerful, emotional narratives where justice finds its way back to the people who deserve it, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps more than you know, and it allows us to keep bringing these stories to life for you every single day. The lake always looked calm from the big house on the hill. Smooth and glassy, the water held the sky like a mirror, sparkling whenever the sun touched it. Guests took pictures on the dock, posed with drinks in their hands, and posted captions about peaceful weekends and healing nature. But for Grace, the lake was just another chore. Another place to carry towels, pick up trash, and clean up after people who didn't know her name. She'd been working for the Harrow family for nearly 20 years, long enough to see their kids grow up, go from toddlers with sticky fingers to teenagers with expensive sneakers and sharp tongues. Long enough to watch summer after summer of guests come and go, laughing on boats while she scrubbed footprints off the decks they left behind. Grace was in her late 50s now. Her back hurt more than it used to. Her hands were rough from chemicals and hot water, but her work was steady, her pay came on time, and she'd learned to swallow the small humiliations that came with being the help. She hummed an old hymn under her breath as she folded fresh towels by the lakeside cabana. The white fabric felt soft and warm in her hands, still holding a trace of the dryer's heat. "Miss Grace, you still down by the lake?" crackled the voice over her walkie-talkie. "Yes, ma'am," she answered, clipping the last towel into a neat stack. "Just finishing up by the dock." "Good, the Harrow kids brought some friends over. They're heading your way. Make sure everything's tidy, all right." "Yes, ma'am," Grace repeated. The line clicked off. She didn't mind the Harrow kids. At least, she hadn't when they were small. Back then, they'd clung to her apron, demanded extra cookies, and fallen asleep on her shoulder when the grown-ups stayed too late at the fire pit. But kids change. Money changes, too. Now, at 17, Ethan Harrow walked like he owned the whole lake. His friends followed him like a little pack, loud and reckless. The only time they noticed Grace anymore was when they needed something, or wanted to entertain themselves with someone who couldn't talk back. Grace turned toward the water and saw them before she heard them. 4 of them today. Ethan in the middle, tall and lean with his father's sharp jaw and his mother's careless eyes. On his left, his younger sister Tessa, 16, blonde ponytail flicking behind her like a flag of loyalty. 2 other boys flanked them, Tyler and Mason, kids from neighboring lake houses who wore the same smugness like it was part of the dress code. They were laughing about something. It didn't matter what. With kids like that, laughter always sat right on the edge of cruelty. Grace straightened, smoothing her uniform top. A simple black dress, white collar, white apron. She'd worn some version of it her whole adult life. People liked their help to look the part. "Afternoon," she said quietly as they approached. No one answered. Ethan flicked his eyes in her direction, giving her a half-second glance the way you might acknowledge a lamppost. Why is it always so humid down here?" Tessa complained, fanning herself with her phone. "Can't we get like one of those misting fans, or a cabana guy at least?" "We have Grace," Ethan smirked. "She's basically everything in one, cleaner, server, furniture." Tyler snorted. "Yeah, background decoration." Grace pretended she didn't hear. She turned away, lifting another towel, folding it carefully. Her hands moved slower these days, but she took pride in the neatness of her work. It was one of the few things in her life she could control. "Hey, Grace," Ethan called suddenly. She turned back, forcing a polite smile. Yes, sir. He pointed at the far end of the dock, where a few flip-flops and an empty can lay abandoned. Go clean that up, yeah, looks trashy. She nodded, of course. She walked toward the end of the dock, the planks creaking softly beneath her shoes. The lake lapped lazily against the posts. A warm breeze brushed her face. She bent down to pick up the can. Behind her she heard footsteps. Quick ones. Too many for just one person. Grace straightened slowly, the hairs on the back of her neck rising. Y'all need something else, she asked gently without turning around. Nah, Ethan's voice answered, too close. Just watching. She turned then, still bent slightly, holding the can in one hand, the pair of flip-flops in the other. They were lined up behind her. Ethan in the center, a cruel smile tugging the corner of his lips. Tessa's eyes glittering with a mix of excitement and nerves. Tyler and Mason shifting from foot to foot, the way boys do when they're about to do something they know is wrong, but don't want to be the one to stop it. What are you watching? Grace asked quietly. An experiment, Ethan said. That's so. Yeah, he glanced at the water. You ever heard about the piranha they put in this lake? Grace stiffened. Of course she'd heard. Everyone who worked at the house had. Mr. Harrow had imported some exotic fish a few years back as a sick brag to his friends, a private thrill for his guests who liked danger at a safe distance. They were supposed to be contained in deeper sections, away from where people swam, but lakes don't respect invisible lines. Grace had never gone in past her knees. Don't talk foolishness, she said, forcing a small laugh. You kids know better than that. Ain't nobody supposed to be near that side of the water. Exactly, Ethan said softly. Nobody's supposed to be here. The wind shifted. The lake, so calm moments before, suddenly looked darker. Grace's fingers tightened around the flip-flops. Y'all need to move back from the edge, she said. Dock ain't a place to play like this. You could slip. Could we? Tyler smirked, stepping closer. Tessa giggled, but not happily. Ethan, stop, she whispered. Dad will freak if something happens. Nothing's going to happen, Ethan said, though his voice held that reckless thrill Grace had seen in boys his age too many times. We're just having fun. He took one more step. Now they were inches from her. Grace took a small step back. The board beneath her heel creaked, unfinished. Her heart pounded once hard. Ethan, she said, her voice dropping to something low and serious she rarely used with them, this ain't funny. Go on back up now. Let me do my work. He tilted his head, studying her. You always do what you're told, Grace. She swallowed, most times. What about now? Now, she said softly, I'm asking you to step back so no one gets hurt. Someone's always getting hurt, he said, just not usually us. Tyler laughed. Mason shifted nervously, dude. And everything that happened next happened too fast. A hand. A shove. A squeal from Tessa. The world tilting. The sky swinging sideways. Grace felt the hard push between her shoulders, felt the dock vanish beneath her feet, felt the sudden drop, the horrible, helpless weightlessness of falling backward with nothing to grab. For a split second, she saw their faces above her. Ethan, eyes wide, smile frozen. Tessa, hand over her mouth. Tyler, phone half raised. Then the water swallowed her. Cold. Shockingly cold. Not like the warm surface she'd felt washing around her ankles before. This was deeper, darker, clamping over her like a fist. Her breath ripped from her chest as she plunged beneath the surface, dress ballooning around her like a trap. She opened her mouth to scream. Water rushed in. Instinct took over. She kicked, arms flailing, heart pounding. The lake pressed against her ears, muting the sounds of the dock. For one terrible moment, Grace thought, this is it. All those years, all those double shifts, all those bruises she kept to herself when she tripped on stairs or hit her hip on furniture. And this is how it ends. Because some bored kids wanted to laugh. Her head broke the surface and she gasped, coughing up lake water. Help, she cried, voice raw. Lord, please. Something brushed her leg. Then again. Vast. Grace froze. The stories came rushing back. Piranha-Infested. Darker parts of the lake. Hungry things below the surface. She thrashed, terror overriding every other thought. Up on the dock, the teens were laughing. "Oh my God, did you see her face?" Tyler wheezed. "She actually thought we were serious," Tessa said, voice shaking between laughter and shock. "Relax," Ethan scoffed. "She'll be fine, it's shallow here." "No, it isn't," Mason muttered nervously. "Dude, my dad said." "Your dad says a lot of things," Ethan snapped. He wasn't laughing now. He was staring at the water, jaw tight, eyes flicking to the spot where Grace had surfaced. "Help," she shouted again, voice cracking. "Please, I can't." Her leg jerked as something tugged her from below. Not hard enough to drag her under, but enough to remind her that she wasn't alone in the water. She clawed for the air, arms flailing. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape her body altogether. She couldn't see them, but she could feel them. Small, fast bodies cutting through the water like bullets, drawn to all the panic and splashing. "Ethan," Tessa whispered, voice shaking now. "Get her out." "Hold on," Ethan shouted down, trying to sound in control, but his voice betrayed him. Just swim to the ladder." "I can't see," Grace cried, water splashing against her face. "I can't." Another brush against her calf. Then a pinch, sharp, burning. She screamed. "Dude," Tyler said quietly, the phone lowering. "This isn't funny anymore." Mason stepped back. "We have to get someone, the groundskeeper or—" "Nobody moves," Ethan snapped, though his own face had turned pale. "If Dad finds out we were out here, he'll—" "Ethan," Tessa screamed. Because she saw it then. Not in the water. On the shore. A man walking down from the path near the boathouse. He wore a dark t-shirt, jeans, boots that had seen real dirt. His expression was unreadable, jaw tight, eyes like steel. Jasonstatham had been standing by the trees for the last 30 seconds, watching everything. Watching the shove. Watching the splash. Watching the seconds tick by while 4 kids stood frozen on the dock, arguing about what they were afraid of losing instead of who they were about to lose. He hadn't run at first. He'd seen panic before, the irrational kind, the "I didn't mean to" kind, the foolish kind teenagers get when they realize fun has turned dangerous. He'd seen men stand frozen watching someone struggle, hoping someone else would step in so they wouldn't have to. He knew the look. He also knew when someone was out of their depth. He reached the dock just as Grace's scream broke across the water again. "Help!" He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask what was going on. He kicked off his boots in one quick motion and sprinted the last stretch of the dock. "Move," he barked at the kids. They scattered aside instinctively, as if some part of them recognized authority that didn't need a badge. Jason reached the edge, took one quick scan of the water to mark her position, and dove. The lake swallowed him whole in a cold rush. Under the surface, everything slowed. The lake muffled the chaos, turning screaming voices into distant echoes. Sunlight fractured above him, sharp beams cutting through murky green. He opened his eyes, searching. There, 5 feet away, Grace flailed just below the surface, dress wrapping around her legs like seaweed, pulling her down each time she tried to kick up. Her arms waved wildly, desperate, trying to find purchase on water that would never hold her. Jason pushed toward her with hard, efficient strokes. He'd been in worse water, stronger currents, darker depths, but fear is the same everywhere, and he could feel hers like a pulse in the waves. Something darted past his leg. Then another. He ignored it. Piranha didn't scare him half as much as cruelty did. He reached Grace just as her face slipped on her again. Her hands brushed his shoulder, fingers clawing. "I've got you," he said, voice calm even under the water as he wrapped an arm around her chest, pinning one of her arms to keep her from dragging them both under. With his free arm, he kicked hard, pushing them toward the surface. They broke through with a splash. Grace gasped like someone yanking air after being buried. "You're all right," Jason said into her ear, holding her firmly. "I've got you, keep your head back, stay with me." Her teeth chattered, whether from cold or terror he couldn't tell. They pushed the fish. "I know," he said. "Don't look down, look at the dock." He angled them toward the wooden ladder attached to the side, kicking steadily. Up on the dock, the teenagers stared. Tessa's lips trembled. Tyler's phone hung useless in his hand now, still recording, lens pointed at nothing. Mason looked ready to vomit. Ethan froze at the edge, his face drained of the cocky confidence he'd worn all afternoon. Jason reached the ladder and pushed Grace's hands toward it. "Grab on," he instructed, "both hands, one step at a time." She obeyed, fingers closing around the wet metal rungs. "Don't let go," he said, keeping a hand between her shoulder blades as he guided her upward. Her shoes slipped, but he steadied her, moving with her step by step until her hands reached the edge of the dock. "Help her up," Jason snapped without looking at the teens. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mason darted forward, grabbing Grace's arm. Tyler followed, gripping her other side. Together, with Jason pushing from below, they hauled her up onto the dock, where she collapsed in a wet, shaking heap. Jason climbed out after her, his shirt clinging to his body, water dripping off him in steady rivulets. He stood for a moment, catching his breath, then knelt beside Grace. "You okay?" he asked softly. She coughed, sputtering like water. I think so, Lord, I thought." "You're all right now," he said, one hand hovering near her shoulder without pressing down. "You're safe." Her eyes met his. They were full of gratitude. And something else. Shame. As if she was embarrassed for needing to be saved. Jason's jaw tightened. Behind them, the kids began talking at once. "Sir, it was an accident. We were just messing around. She slipped, I swear. We didn't mean." "Shut up," Jason said quietly. They did. Now that they stood in front of him up close, he could see everything more clearly. The expensive clothes, the manicured nails, the slight sunburn on their noses, the fear in their eyes now that reality had snapped back into place and refused to let them look away. He stood slowly. Water dripped from his jeans, pooling around his boots. He rolled his shoulders once, his expression calm, but his eyes were not calm. He turned to face the teens fully. "Which one of you pushed her?" he asked. No one answered. The breeze picked up, rippling across the water as if waiting too. Jason's gaze swept across them, landing briefly on each face. Ethan swallowed hard. Tessa looked down. Tyler shifted. Mason stared at his shoes. Grace tried to sit up behind him, but he lifted a hand gently without turning. "Stay there, ma'am. Catch your breath." He took one step closer to the kids. "Let me make this simple," he said. "I was standing on the shore, I saw what you did, so I'll ask you again." His voice dropped to something softer. "More dangerous. Which one of you put your hands on her first?" The doc fell silent. For the first time that day, none of them were laughing. And as Jason waited for an answer, the weight of what they'd done finally started to sink in, heavier than the lake, deeper than fear, and nowhere near finished. Ethan swallowed hard, but no sound left his throat. Tessa stared at her shoes, shaking. Tyler wiped his palms on his shorts. Mason actually took a step back from the group, as if distance might erase what he'd done. Jason waited. The lake behind him lapped softly against the supports of the dock, almost peaceful, a cruel contrast to the panic that had erupted just minutes earlier. Grace sat trembling at the far end of the boards, trying to steady her breath. Her soaked uniform clung to her trembling frame, water dripping from her sleeves, her hair matted to her forehead. Every few seconds, she flinched when the breeze brushed over her skin, as if expecting something unseen to pull her back into the water. Jason glanced at her briefly, just long enough to confirm she wasn't slipping into shock. Then his eyes returned to the teens. "I'm waiting," he said quietly. "One of you step forward." Still no one did. Ethan finally spoke, but his voice was thin and brittle. She fell." Tyler's eyes widened. "Dude, no, he saw you push her." "Shut up, Tyler," Ethan hissed. Jason's jaw tightened. He took 2 slow steps forward, not threatening, not aggressive, but deliberate enough to make the wooden planks creak beneath his weight. "You think lying is going to save you?" he asked calmly. Ethan lifted his chin half an inch, clinging to the last scraps of arrogance. "I'm not lying. She wasn't paying attention, You shoved her," Jason said. "I watched you do it." Ethan froze. "You think I didn't see?" Jason continued. "I watched the whole thing from the shore. I watched you get bored. I watched you rile each other up. I watched you try to scare her. I watched the moment it stopped being a joke and became something else." Tessa's breath hitched softly. Jason turned toward her. "You think being quiet makes you innocent?" he asked gently. Her shoulders shook. She didn't answer. "Standing still while someone else hurts a person," he continued, "is the same as putting your hand on their back and pushing." Tessa covered her mouth. Tyler spoke next, voice trembling. Are you gonna call the cops?" Jason looked at him. "Does that frighten you?" Tyler nodded. "Good," Jason said softly, "because fear is the first step toward understanding the pain you cause someone else." Ethan stepped forward suddenly, anger flaring as he tried to regain control. "Look, man, you can't come in here and talk to us like." Jason didn't raise a hand. He didn't move an inch. He just looked at Ethan, calm and steady. And Ethan's voice died mid-sentence. "You pushed a 58-year-old woman into a lake full of piranha," Jason said, "and you were laughing while she screamed." Ethan's face went white. Jason took one more step, bringing himself face to face with the boy. "You want to argue with me about respect?" he asked quietly. Ethan's lips trembled. "This isn't fair," Tessa whispered suddenly. "We didn't know the fish were that close." Jason turned slowly toward her. "So that makes it better." Tessa sucked in a shaky breath. Jason stepped past them, walking toward the edge of the dock, toward the exact spot where Grace had gone under. The teens watched him in confused silence. "Come here," he said without turning around. None of them moved. Jason looked over his shoulder. "I said come here." There was no threat in his voice, none needed. They moved. Slowly. Reluctantly. One by one. Ethan, Tessa, Tyler, Mason. They lined up beside him at the edge of the dock, staring down into the water. The lake looked deceptively calm again, sunlight sparkling across it like broken glass. Not a single ripple betrayed what lurked beneath. "Look," Jason said quietly. They stared. At first, they didn't understand what he meant. Then Tyler gasped. A thin trail of red drifted lazily beneath the surface, dissolving slowly, spreading into the water like ink in a glass. Blood. Grace's blood. Ethan staggered back a step, hand flying to his mouth. "Oh my God." Tessa's knees buckled, and she grabbed the railing for support. Tyler stumbled forward, whispering, I didn't know they were." "You didn't care," Jason said. His voice was still calm. Still level. That somehow made it worse. "You shoved her," he continued, "into this water, into a lake with predators. You watched her struggle, you watched her beg, and you laughed." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. Jason leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper just for them. "You need to see what that feels like." Ethan's eyes snapped open, terrified. What do you mean?" Jason didn't touch him. Didn't push him. Didn't even raise a hand. He simply pointed. "Get down on your knees." All 14 stared at him in horror. "No," Ethan whispered. "No, I'm not, I won't." Jason took one slow step toward him, and Ethan's knees gave out on their own. He dropped with a thud against the boards, breathing quick and shallow. Tessa followed, tears spilling over now. Tyler knelt stiffly, his face pale. Mason sank to the boards like someone had cut the strings holding him up. Jason crouched down beside them, one knee on the wooden planks, placing himself eye level with the trembling group. "Now," he said softly, "lean forward." Tessa shook her head violently. "Please, please, no." "Lean forward," Jason repeated. Ethan shut his eyes. Slowly, shaking, they obeyed, leaning over the edge until their faces hovered inches above the water. Jason stayed behind them, watching the reflection of their terrified eyes in the lake. "Imagine," he said quietly, "what it felt like to fall." Tyler choked on a sob. "Imagine," Jason continued, "what it felt like to hit that water, knowing something was down there, and you couldn't see where it was." They whimpered. Behind them, Grace watched from the dock bench, wrapped in a towel someone had run to fetch. She shivered as the wind touched her damp skin, but she didn't look away. She'd spent years swallowing her pain. She wasn't swallowing this moment. Jason lowered his voice even further. Imagine what it felt like to be alone. No one to help you, no one to listen, just screams and laughter behind you. Mason was crying openly now. Ethan's shoulders shook uncontrollably. "Do you feel it?" Jason asked. "Yes," Tessa sobbed. "Yes," Tyler whispered. "Good," Jason said, because she felt it too. He let the moment stretch, not long but long enough. Then he stood. "Get up." They scrambled backward on all fours, before climbing unsteadily to their feet. Jason stepped between them and the water, blocking the view, grounding the moment. "You can't undo what you did," he said, "but you're going to answer for it." Ethan wiped his nose with the back of his hand. What are you gonna do?" "Your parents will be here in 10 minutes, Jason said. "I called them." All 14 stiffened. No, please, my dad will kill me," Ethan stammered. "He should be more worried about what you almost did to her," Jason replied, nodding toward Grace. Tessa covered her face. "We didn't mean to hurt her." "But you did," Jason said, "and meaning doesn't erase consequences." Boots pounded down the dock, heavy, adult footfalls this time. Mr. Harrow rounded the corner first, face flushed with frustration. His wife followed, looking frantic. 2 security men from the property jogged behind them. "What happened?" Mr. Harrow demanded. "Why did you call saying it was an emergency?" Then he saw Grace. Saw her soaked uniform. Saw the blood at her calf. Saw the teens shaking. And saw Jason standing between them. He froze. "Explain," he said sharply. Jason didn't sugarcoat it. "They pushed her," he said, "into the water." Mr. Harrow blinked. "What?" Jason pointed at Ethan. "Him first," the others didn't stop it. A silence fell so heavy it made the air feel thick. Mr. Harrow walked slowly toward his son. "Is that true?" Ethan sobbed. "Dad, Is it true?" his father repeated, voice cold as steel. Ethan collapsed into tears. "Yes." Mr. Harrow's face contorted into something that wasn't anger, it was worse. Disappointment. Disgust. A parent realizing his own child had become someone capable of cruelty he never taught, but also never corrected. He turned to Grace. "My God," he whispered. "Grace, I'm so sorry." She looked down, unable to speak. Jason stepped closer to her. "You don't need to apologize for anything." But Mr. Harrow shook his head. "I do. I hired her. I promised she'd be safe here. I never." His voice cracked. Mrs. Harrow reached for Grace's hand. "We'll take you to the doctor immediately. And Jason, thank you for saving her." Jason nodded once. Mr. Harrow turned to the teens, his voice dropping into a tone that shook the boards beneath their feet. "You will each write statements, full ones, no excuses. Then you will go home, and for the rest of the summer, you will report every morning at 6 a.m. to work with the grounds crew. You want to act like you're above the help. Let's see how long that attitude lasts when you're doing their job." Ethan didn't argue. None of them did. Mr. Harrow gestured for security. "Escort them, take their phones." The guards moved in. Tyler handed his phone over without a word. Mason followed. Tessa looked distraught. Ethan hung his head as he was led away. Jason watched them, but he didn't feel triumphant. Just resolved. Grace shivered again. Jason crouched beside her. "You're all right," he said softly. "It's over." She looked at him through watery eyes. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me." "I do," she whispered. "No one else ever stood up for me like that." Jason's face softened. "Then it's about time someone did." She wiped her cheeks. "Thought I was gonna die out there." He shook his head gently. "Not while I was standing on this dock." Grace took a deep breath, the first steady one since she hit the water. Mr. Harrow and his wife stepped beside them. "We're taking her to the clinic now," Mrs. Harrow said. "Jason, I don't know how to repay you." Jason stood slowly. "Just take care of her." "We will," Mr. Harrow said firmly. "I promise." They guided Grace carefully down the dock, supporting her on each side. Jason watched them go. The lake rippled quietly behind him, the blood trail now gone, diffused into the water. Justice wasn't loud today. It wasn't violent, but it was absolute. He picked up his boots from where he left them at the start of the dock and walked toward the shore, the sun dipping low behind him. Another corner of the world corrected. Another person saved from cruelty. Not because Jasonstatham wanted recognition. Not because he needed applause. But because some people, when they see someone being pushed, step forward instead of walking away. And they make sure the push never happens again.